At first, Clara ignored all the warnings. She had one dream, to have the most unforgettable wedding in the city of Abuja, and for that, she believed the cake had to be flawless. Her eyes were fixed on one place only, Lulu's Divine Bakes. People called it the crown jewel of cakes in Nigeria. Clara didn't mind that Lulu only accepted orders at strange hours midnight to be exact. What mattered to her was having the cake that would make jaws drop and guests gasp. But now, as she sat on the cold tile floor of her new home, watching her husband crawl and grunt like a beast, her eyes wide with terror, Clara Wishno begged for time to rewind. She wished she had listened. Once, nestled in a quiet part of Abuja, was a cake shop so enchanting that it sparkled in the night like a jewel. Lulu's Divine Bakes wasn't just a bakery, it was a legend. Brides came from as far as Port Harcourt and Jos just to place an order. Each cake shimmered with edible gold, stood tall like a cathedral tower, and melted in your mouth like soft silk. But what no one knew, what no one dared to even imagine was that each slice held something unnatural, something dark. The shop's owner, Miss Lulu, was a reserved woman in her late 40s. Her face never bore a smile, and her hands were always gloved, even in scorching heat. She never mingled, never posted on social media, and never accepted walk-in customers. Her shop only opened at night. No one questioned it, not when the cakes were that good. The legend of Lulu began on a hot Thursday in the heart of a crowded market. A gentle-looking woman appeared with a wooden stand and plates of cakes labeled free tasting. Curious buyers swarmed her store, and the moment the first bite touched their tongues, they were hooked. One woman was said to have danced uncontrollably in the middle of the market. Another man wept, claiming the cake reminded him of his late mother's love. Word spread like wildfire. Before long, people flocked to her hidden shop in droves, placing orders like they were possessed. Some bought whole cakes for themselves. Some even bribed others just to get a second slice. It wasn't just the taste, it was the experience. They said the moment the cake touched your lips, your body went warm, like being wrapped in a mother's arms. But with time, strange things happened. Customers stopped craving other food. They became forgetful, obsessive, quiet. They returned again and again, like addicts. But Clara didn't believe in gossip. She wasn't that kind of woman. When her wedding planner suggested Lulu's Divine Bakes, she jumped at the chance. "I'll take it," she said without hesitation, even when told she had to make the order through an encrypted app available only between 12 and 1 a.m. She didn't flinch when she saw the hefty price tag. She paid in full that night. Her best friend, Tasha, didn't take it lightly. "Clara, are you sure about this cake?" she asked, with furrowed brows, as they sipped drinks at a rooftop lounge. Clara gave her a sidelong glance. "Tasha, what now? I mean, don't you find it weird that she only takes orders at night? There's something not right." "A woman came to our church and said her son ate Lulu's cake and turned strange." Clara's eyes narrowed with a hint of amusement. "Strange how?" "He stopped eating food," Tasha said in a low voice. "He only wanted raw meat. Eventually, he started chewing on rats in their house." "Actual rats, Clara. They brought him for deliverance, and the pastor said the cake was behind it." Clara's laughter echoed so loud that nearby guests turned their heads. "Rats? Please, Tasha. That's the funniest thing I've heard all month. A child ate cake and turned into a rat-eating zombie. Wow. Tell your pastor he should be writing Nollywood scripts. You're not taking this seriously." "No, because it's ridiculous. I'm not cancelling the cake of my dreams because of some hungry pastor and a dramatic mother. Please." Tasha's expression darkened, but she said nothing more. She had known Clara long enough to know that once her mind was made, not even a firestorm could sway her. Still, something didn't feel right. That night, Tasha went on her knees and prayed. "Lord, I don't know what this cake is about, but I have a terrible feeling. Please protect Clara from all evil," she whispered with trembling lips. But Clara, oblivious, slept peacefully. Her dreams were of white roses, fireworks, applause, and her perfect cake at the center of it all. The next day, Clara got a call from her fiancé, Tolu. "Babe, Mama's flight just landed. She's on her way from the airport." Clara's heart fluttered. She had never met Tolu's mother in person. All their conversations had been through text messages. She had always imagined her as a sweet, classy woman. Clara spent hours preparing egusi soup, poundo, and peppered snails, Tolu's mother's favorite. She also picked out 2 Ankara gowns and an Aso oak hand-woven bag she had saved for months to buy. But when she arrived at Tolu's house, the woman who greeted her didn't smile. Madame Abike, Tolu's mother, sat like a queen on the sofa, her eyes narrow and searching. She watched every step Clara took, as though trying to see beyond her flesh. She didn't comment on the food. She barely chewed. When Clara presented her with the wrapped gifts, she opened them slowly, like they were nothing special. "You really have poor taste in fashion," she said coldly. Clara's heart sank. Her smile faltered, but she held her composure. Tolu chuckled awkwardly and tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but the air in the room was thick. "I don't know what it is," Madame Abike finally said, her voice sharp like a knife. "But there is something dark that follows you, Clara. It lingers around you like a foul shadow. I dreamt about you last week." She paused and looked Clara straight in the eyes. "In the dream, you stood in a grand wedding hall, everyone clapping and laughing. Then suddenly, your stomach began to swell. Bigger, bigger, and then you gave birth to a dog." Clara froze. Everyone screamed and ran. It was a nightmare. Tolu blinked rapidly and chuckled nervously. "Mommy, it's just jet lag. That dream doesn't mean anything." But Madame Abike was not joking. She stood up, dusted her wrapper, and looked at Clara one last time. "If anything happens to my son, I will hold you responsible." Then she turned to her son. "If you still marry her, you do so at your own peril." And she left. Clara sat frozen, her fingers clenched into her dress. Tolu placed his hand on her shoulder. "Babe, don't mind her. You know how dramatic my mom can be." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling. That night, sleep abandoned her. She kept seeing herself in that wedding gown, stomach swelling, dogs barking. She told Tasha the next day. "You see, I told you," Tasha said. "You need to fast and pray. Cancel that cake order too." But Clara walked away. The wedding day arrived. Clara did everything to stay calm. Her glam team arrived early at her hotel room, and they transformed her into a vision of beauty. She stepped out of the car in her glittering white dress, stunning the crowd into silence. But as she scanned the crowd, her heart sank. There it was, the Ankara dress she had bought for Madame Abike, now worn by another woman in the audience, and the designer handbag dangling from that same woman's shoulder. Madame Abike had not only rejected Clara's gifts, she had given them away. Clara's heart tightened, her hands trembled, and that was just the beginning. Just as Clara was about to answer her husband's question about what was wrong, a loud honk startled everyone at the venue. A delivery van decorated with purple ribbons and gold icing symbols pulled up in front of the hall. Clara's heart skipped a beat. The side of the van read in bold cursive, "Lulu's Divine Bakes." She stood motionless, her eyes wide as she watched the cake handlers emerge from the vehicle. Then, as if summoned by a force no one understood, a pack of 12 wild-looking dogs came sprinting from different directions. They barked furiously, leaping and snarling at the cake. The crowd gasped. The cake handlers tried frantically to keep the animals away, waving sticks and yelling. After a chaotic few minutes, they managed to scare the dogs off and carried the cake carefully into the reception hall. Guests whispered in confusion. Some stood, others sat stiffly in their chairs, glancing nervously toward the entrance. The wedding planner rushed forward, grabbed the microphone, and laughed nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's just dogs," she said, forcing a smile. "Please relax. The wedding must go on." Her voice trembled slightly. A few people clapped hesitantly. Others stayed quiet, muttering prayers under their breath or trading worried looks. Still, as time passed, the tension began to lift. Clara and her groom, Tolu, stood before the altar and said their vows. The audience clapped and cheered when the officiant finally announced them as husband and wife. But the moment of peace was short-lived. The call to cut the cake rang out across the hall. Clara turned toward it, and for a brief moment she hesitated. Her heart pounded. Tolu's hand rested on hers as they held the knife together. The voices of the crowd blended in a chorus. "Cut the cake, cut the cake." Clara hesitated, Memories rushing back Tasha's warnings, Madame Abike's terrifying dream, her own uneasiness. But it was too late to turn back. The knife sank into the beautiful cake, and applause erupted. Waitresses moved quickly to serve slices to the guests. Plates were handed out with delight as cameras flashed and the scent of sugar and vanilla filled the air. One woman moaned with delight, "It tastes like heaven." Another added, "This is the best cake I've ever had. I need more." Even the same woman who had received Clara's gifted outfit from Madame Abikeno repurposes smacked her lips and held her plate out for seconds. At first, the reception came alive again, but soon after, a strange shift swept through the hall. The guests, once lively and laughing, grew still. Some clutched their empty plates like prized possessions, their eyes fixed on the remaining cake. Others scraped the surfaces with their forks, desperate for just one more crumb. People formed lines around the cake table, murmuring and pleading. Some pulled out naira notes, trying to bribe the servers for an extra slice. A waitress shook her head and tried to explain that the cake was finished, but the crowd refused to believe her. Clara stood at a distance, watching it all in disbelief. Tolu, who had never liked cake, was on his third slice. Sweat formed on his brow. His hands trembled slightly as he leaned close and whispered, "Did they pack the leftovers?" Clara blinked. "No, babe, the cake is finished." The rage that appeared in his eyes chilled her to the core. Back at home, it got worse. Tolu tore through their wedding bags like a madman. He opened every box, dug through the suitcases, even unwrapped decorative gift shopping, searching, praying to find a forgotten slice. But there was none. Nothing. He became irritable and irrational. He screamed, cursed, and slammed drawers. Clara stood frozen by the wall, too afraid to get close. That evening, Madame Abike paid them a surprise visit. She entered the living room and nearly dropped her purse. Tolu was curled up on the floor, pale and trembling, holding an empty plate and mumbling incoherently. He looked up at his mother and began to laugh an eerie, high-pitched laugh that echoed through the room. Madame Abike staggered back in horror. Clara tried to explain, tried to make her understand that it was the cake, but the older woman shook her head violently, tears in her eyes. "What have you done to my son, you witch?" she cried, pointing an accusing finger at Clara. "No, please listen to me. It was the cake, the same cake from Lulu's bakery." "You're lying," Madame Abike yelled. "I warned him. I told him you were a curse. Now look at him. Look what you've done." She shoved Clara aside and rushed to her son. From that day, Madame Abike moved into the house and barred Clara from the bedroom. Tolu, now completely out of his senses, had taken to eating raw meat from the freezer. Clara watched helplessly, remembering Tasha's story of the boy who ate rats. Tears streamed down her face. She finally understood it wasn't just superstition, it was real. The next morning, Clara rushed to Tasha's house. "I'm ready," she said, her voice cracking. "Take me to your pastor, please. My husband is no longer himself." Tasha didn't say much. She simply nodded and led her to a small church tucked away in Gaki. The moment Pastor Bayo saw Clara, he closed his Bible and stood up slowly. "You finally believe," he said with quiet authority. Clara fell to her knees, weeping. "Please help my husband. I think he's under a spell." Pastor Bayo took her hands and began to pray. Minutes passed in silence. Then he opened his eyes. "This is no ordinary affliction," he said firmly. "The cake was not just food. It was a spiritual trap. Your home was invaded by something ancient. If we don't act quickly, your husband will be lost forever." Clara's chest heaved. "Can he be saved?" "Yes," the pastor replied, "but I must pray for him in person. Deliverance must happen face to face." Clara begged him to come with her. She knew there was no way Tolu would walk into a church. But when they arrived, Madame Abike stood in the doorway with fire in her eyes. "I knew you'd bring one of your fake prophets," she screamed. "You want to finish what you started, eh? Over my dead body. Please, just let him pray for your son," Clara pleaded. "Never. Get out of here and take this fraud with you." She slammed the door. Clara collapsed on the ground. Pastor Bayo helped her up gently. "Do not lose hope," he said. "The enemy thrives in secrecy, But when the truth is exposed, chains break. That night, Clara made a decision. If Madame Abike wouldn't believe her, then she would gather proof. Proof that would expose the horror behind the cursed cakes. She waited near Lulu's shop until midnight. At exactly 12 o'clock, the lights inside flickered on. She crept closer, phone in hand. A strange melody echoed from within. Someone was humming a song that chilled her to the bone. Clara peeked through the window. What she saw made her gasp in horror. Lulute Quiet Baker was no longer human. Her lower body had transformed into the glittering tail of a mermaid. And she wasn't alone. The bakery was flooded like an underwater palace. Other mermaids floated through the space, mixing batter and shaping cakes with unnatural speed. There were no ovens, no fire, yet cakes were rising on their own. Clara's hands trembled as she recorded. Her phone shook when one of the cakes moved. The cakes were breathing. One even opened an eye and blinked at her. She clutched her mouth to stifle a scream. Hundreds of cakes were being produced in mere minutes, glowing with golden light. Beautiful on the outside, but alive, evil. Clara backed away in horror, ready to run. But then she saw them, those same strange dogs that had attacked her wedding cake. They were surrounding the building now. Clara bolted. Her heart pounded. Her legs flew across the quiet street as the dogs began to chase her. She didn't stop. Branches scraped her skin. Her dress tore. She tripped and crashed into the ground. As the dogs drew closer, Clara cried out for help. She grabbed a stick, ready to fight, when she heard something that made her entire body freeze. A voice, not human. One of the dogs was speaking. Clara froze as one of the dogs began to speak. It was Tolu. He revealed that he and the others were once human, turned into dogs by an evil mermaid who had overtaken Lulu's divine bakes. On the bakery's launch day, Clara's friend Lulu and her entire team were cursed and forced to watch in silence as their shop was used to distribute dark enchanted cakes. Moved with compassion, Clara took the dogs to a powerful prayer minister, Pastor Kunle, who broke the spell. Before their eyes, the dogs transformed back into humans. Grateful and weeping, they shared their story. Clara confessed what had happened to her husband, Tolu, and they all rushed to his house. Inside, they found him attacking Madame Abike. Pastor Kunle intervened with prayer, and Tolu collapsed. Moments later, he woke up restored, human again. Madame Abike, shaken and remorseful, begged Clara for forgiveness. Clara forgave her, and they embraced. That night, Clara posted the video of the transformation and the cursed bakery. It went viral overnight. But when authorities arrived at Lulu's Divine Bakes, it had burned to ash except for one untouched slice of cake. From that day forward, Nigerians became wary of their cakes, prayed more fervently, and paid closer attention to spiritual warnings. Clara and Tolu got a second chance at life, and the world finally saw that evil often hides in beautiful places, and sometimes the people we dismiss are the ones sent to save us. If you're still watching, that means you're hooked on this story, and we love that. Before you go, make sure to like the video if you're invested in the drama. Comment below. Now we want to hear from you. Drop your comments. Share with friends who love powerful storytelling.